The drivers found out on a Sunday. A memo went out in the last days of the year telling them the company intended to shut down completely. No warning, no negotiation, no last stand to keep the gates open. 91 years of hauling freight out of one small Illinois river town switched off over a weekend. And here's the part that should bother you. This wasn't some fragile startup that never had a chance. Standard Forwarding had already died once and come back. It had outlasted the Great Depression. It had outlasted the Great Recession. It had even been owned for years by the German post office. A company like that does not just stop. So what actually happened in East Moline? Start at the beginning, because the beginning is the whole point. 1934. The country is still flat on its back from the crash. A man named Gene Newman opens a freight line in the Quad Cities, that cluster of working towns straddling the Mississippi where Illinois meets Iowa. And right there, a few miles down the road in Moline, sits Deere and Company. Green and yellow iron, tractors and implements rolling off the line. The company would later say that John Deere was a customer from the very start, from 1934 onward. Now that's the company telling its own story, so take the exact date with a grain of salt. But the geography doesn't lie. You don't build a freight operation in the shadow of the biggest farm equipment maker in America and not haul its parts. For decade after decade, that was the bread and butter. Moving the pieces that kept American agriculture turning. If you ran a wrench in a Deere plant or stood waiting on a shipment of implement parts that hadn't shown up yet, this was the outfit that was supposed to bring them. Ownership passed hand to hand the way these companies do. Newman ran it for years. In 1980, a man named Rainsford Brown Jr. took it over. In 2003, he sold it to his own daughter. A family business, a regional carrier, 14 terminals scattered across Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Nothing flashy about it. The kind of company that just works, year after year, until one year it doesn't. That year was 2009. The economy had cratered all over again, and Standard Forwarding filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, this matters, so don't skip past it. Chapter 11 is not a funeral, it's reorganization. The trucks kept rolling. And in March of 2010, 4 members of its own senior leadership did something you almost never see anymore. They bought the assets themselves. People who actually knew the business, putting their own money on the line that it could be saved. Their president later pinned the collapse on operating costs that ran higher than the rest of the market, on top of the wider economy. They cut what they had to cut and kept hauling under a new name, Standard Forwarding, LLC. So by 2010, the scoreboard reads like this: Depression, survived. Recession, survived. Bankruptcy, survived. Clawed back by the very people who ran the place. This was a tough, stubborn company. Hold on to that, because it's exactly what makes the ending so hard to swallow. Then in June of 2011, Standard Forwarding got bought by Deutsche Post DHL, the German postal and logistics giant. The same company that delivers the mail in Bonn now owned a 14-terminal trucking line in East Moline, Illinois. And the reason it wanted one is its own small tragedy. DHL had just spent years and close to $10 billion trying to force its way into the American domestic parcel business, going head-to-head with FedEx and UPS on their home ground. It did not work. By the start of 2009, DHL had pulled out of domestic parcel delivery in the United States entirely, a humiliation measured in billions of dollars. And yet, 2.5 years later, it slipped back into American ground freight through a side door, a regional carrier most Americans had never heard of. In DHL's own telling, the one thing it had been missing was a true road transportation business in the United States. Standard was how it finally got one. For about 14 years, that's how it sat, a quiet Quad Cities trucker hauling Midwest freight owned from clear across the Atlantic. Stable, unremarkable, alive. Then, in January of 2025, DHL sold it. The buyer was an outfit called Sakayem Holdings, tied to the Riggs family behind Jack Cooper, the big Teamsters staffed auto hauler that moves brand new cars off the assembly lines. The deal was done so quietly that the trade press had to reconstruct it after the fact, from documents and from people who actually worked there. There was no fanfare. It was assembled through a separate entity, almost off to the side, the way you'd handle something you didn't want examined too closely. And look at who they put in the corner offices. The new leadership was stacked with veterans of Yellow Corporation, the carrier behind the single largest less-than-truckload collapse in American history. The new president, the chief commercial officer, the head of operations and strategy, the technology lead, drawn from Yellow and from Jack Cooper's own freight side. And the same family had already tried twice to pick up a piece of Yellow's body after it went under. Bids in 2023 and again in 2024, both turned down, the assets later auctioned off in pieces instead. Be fair about this. These men did not cause Yellow to fail. Careers in this industry overlap. People go where the work is. But it is hard to ignore the shape of the thing. The people who couldn't buy or save the most famous failure in modern trucking now had both hands on a 91-year-old survivor. And what they did with it followed a very old, very familiar pattern. They expanded. Fast. Standard had always been a tight regional carrier, roughly 5 states. Within months, the company announced it was reaching into 11 more. Arizona, California, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Nevada, Ohio, South Dakota, and Utah. A 5-state operation stretched across 16 states in a matter of months. On paper, that reads like ambition. Look closer, and a lot of those new lanes were run through partner carriers. Not new terminals, not new buildings, not Standard's own trucks sitting on the ground in those states. It was a map getting bigger, while the company underneath it was not. And the records backed that up. By the time it shut down, the company was down to around 230 drivers, a leaner outfit than the one the new owners had taken over. That is not growth. That is a company being stretched thin and hoping nobody looks too hard. And the parent holding all of it together was already on fire. Jack Cooper had been through bankruptcy once before, back in 2019. Then, in 2025, it was losing its Ford car hauling contract, a blow that openly threatened the jobs of more than 1,400 Teamster car haul workers. The core business, the thing that was supposed to anchor this whole operation, was buckling at the exact moment its new little trucking line was trying to conquer half the country. You can probably see where this road ends now, the last week of December 2025, the memo. The drivers told the company was shutting down for good. The Teamsters, the union representing those workers, said they were completely blindsided. By their account, Standard had never once come to them about any trouble, never raised a single warning flag, never tried to sit down and work out a way to avoid it. A unionized freight carrier, already a rare and shrinking thing in this business, switched off with no conversation at all. And there is one last detail, the kind that tells you everything about how the modern version of this company actually thought. Publicly, the official word wasn't "we're closing." It was a temporary suspension of operations, but the drivers were terminated. The executives moved on. The union was told flatly that the company intended to shut down entirely. And weeks later, deep into late January of 2026, the website was still standing, quietly advertising freight brokerage services. No trucks, no terminals, no drivers. Just a name and a phone number, still selling the idea of moving freight it no longer hauled.